Operation Iron 2.
Okay, today I'm going to talk about a substance that is sold in supplement form, and it's also produced in the human body. And I've been asked some questions about it, so that's the purpose of this video. The substance in question is called arachidonic acid, or AA. Arachidonic acid. What is it? It's an omega-6 fatty acid. Now, you've probably heard of omega-3 fatty acids, such as found in fish oil. Omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids are usually found in excess in the human diet in comparison to omega-3. And the problem with that is some people think that omega-6 fatty acids tend to be inflammatory. In other words, they could worsen any type of inflammatory condition. Any type of pain in your body will be magnified if you take in an abundance of omega-6 fatty acids, and that includes arachidonic acid. Now, arachidonic acid is actually the cornerstone. It's the precursor. It's the main substance from which a lot of these inflammatory mediators are produced from under the action of certain enzymes. Now, arachidonic acid, again, it's an omega-6 fatty acid. Is it essential in human nutrition? The answer to that is no. The reason for that is that it can be made in the body from the major omega-3 fatty acid, which is called linoleic acid. Linoleic acid is the omega-6 fatty acid that is essential in human nutrition. It's found in dozens of foods, most protein foods, especially vegetable oils, corn oil, soy oil, and that type of thing. They're loaded with omega-6. And a lot of processed foods contain omega-6, much more omega-6 than omega-3. Omega-3, such as in fish oil, is anti-inflammatory. Now, the question of just how inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, that's another discussion. In fact, it's very extensive to answer that question. I will be answering that and examining that in detail in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. In other words, are omega-6 fatty acids as inflammatory as most people believe? That's going to be an upcoming article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, and it's going to freak a lot of people out because I don't want to give it away, but it's going to have some surprising information in there concerning omega-6 fatty acids. By the way, omega-6 fatty acids, because of their inflammatory effect, are also related to the spread of cancer in the human body. So anyway, like I said, arachidonic acid isn't it's an omega-6 fatty acid. It's not essential. It's found naturally in most protein foods, such as red meat, chicken, turkey, dairy foods, egg yolks, which most bodybuilders throw out, big mistake, hard cheese, and some types of fish. Now, I have to point out, and this is an essential part of what I'm going to lead up to, the amount of arachidonic acid naturally found in these protein foods is minuscule. You'd have to eat huge amounts to get any significant amount of arachidonic acid, which in a way is good because arachidonic acid produces both mainly inflammatory but also anti-inflammatory substances. So you wouldn't want to really take a ton of arachidonic acid. You don't want to consume a lot of it because it would produce inflammation in just about anybody. And I think this is why nature has set the amount of AA or arachidonic acid levels in most natural foods kind of on the low side. The richest source is beef kidney. And to get a decent amount of arachidonic acid, you'd have to ingest about nearly a pound a day of beef kidney. I don't think most people do that. So for purposes of increasing AA in the body in relation to bodybuilding or strength building, it's kind of comparable to creatine. I mean, to get the amount of creatine in 1 teaspoon of a creatine supplement, you'd have to eat nearly 2.5 pounds of meat. So it's much more convenient to take a creatine supplement. The same goes with AA or arachidonic acid. You can get it in protein foods, but you'd have to eat a lot of it to get a significant amount. Okay. Now, AA in the body, arachidonic acid is very important. Again, even though it has a bad reputation of this as being an inflammatory mediator or precursor, It's also found in cell membranes. It's also in the brain. In the brain, it comprises 10 to 12% of all the fatty acids in the brain. One of the other main fatty acids in the brain is called DHA, which is one of the omega-3 fatty acids. And you know, the human body doesn't do anything by chance. If there's a large concentration of arachidonic acid in the brain, it's there for a good reason. And some studies show it is involved in neural transmission. In other words, basically how your brain works. In the skeletal muscles, arachidonic acid comprises 15 to 17% of fatty acids. And again, a lot of this is in the muscle cell membranes. As I said, it's best known for its inflammatory. Arachidonic acid is best known for its role as the precursor for several inflammatory mediators in the body. What are these inflammatory mediators? They include classes of various compounds, prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and thromboxans, right? Now, the thing is, you know, as I say, some of these inflammatory mediators are very inflammatory, so others are conversely anti-inflammatory. When you ingest omega-3, you tend to promote the anti-inflammatory pathway. When you ingest AA or arachidonic acid, you tend to promote the inflammatory pathway. Now, why would a bodybuilder, it's a good question. Why would it's actually the main question. Why would a bodybuilder be interested in ingesting an arachidonic acid supplement? Okay, the first reason is, again, it's found in very scarce amounts in protein foods. You have to eat a lot of them. On the other hand, it is synthesized in the body from linoleic acid, which is abundant in food. It's loaded in just about all foods are just overloaded with linoleic acid. But there's a key point here. Linoleic acid has to be, it has to be converted into arachidonic acid, but arachidonic acid to be converted into the prostaglandins and these other substances requires a certain enzyme, two enzymes called cyclooxygenase enzymes. I'll get to that in a second. But from a bodybuilding point of view, the reason why you would possibly want to consider an arachidonic acid supplement is because in temporary localized inflammation in muscle after training kickstarts the initial pathway towards muscle hypertrophy or growth. In other words, the temporary inflammation you get in your muscles, which results from the muscle damage that you incur during exercise, actually promotes the migration of various growth factors and stimulates other, let's say, hormonal effects in the muscle that result or kind of lead into muscle growth. And if you do anything to block this inflammatory process, you could inhibit muscle growth. Now the thing is, from a bodybuilding point of view, as I say, the main prostaglandin involved in this muscle building process right after exercise is called prostaglandin F2A. And the important point here is prostaglandin F2A is made from arachidonic acid. So, in other words, that explains it. Arachidonic acid also increases the density of cell receptors for hormones such as insulin and insulin-like growth factor 1, both of which are involved in anabolic processes in muscle. Now I mentioned that enzyme cyclooxygenase. Now, cyclooxygenase is required to convert arachidonic acid into prostaglandin F2A, the anabolic prostaglandin. However, certain drugs, for example, pain relievers such as ibuprofen or Advil, even aspirin, how do they work? They relieve pain by blocking the activity of cyclooxygenase, which in turn prevents the synthesis of these inflammatory prostaglandins that cause pain. Now, that's a good thing if you're suffering from a headache or joint pain or something like that. But if you're trying to build muscle, you don't want to inhibit the cyclooxygenase enzyme, which is needed for this prostaglandin F2A to kickstart muscle hypertrophy. What does this mean? It means that right after a workout, you want to avoid ingesting pain-relieving drugs such as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Typical example is ibuprofen, aspirin. You want to avoid that. However, if you ingest, let's say if you're really hurting and you ingest an ibuprofen dosage of 400 milligrams or less, it's not going to adversely affect the muscle building process. You have to ingest more than 400 milligrams to adversely affect muscle growth or muscle recovery. Now, an interesting thing is, kind of interesting, is the fact that it works in reverse for older people. A lot of older people gradually get this systemic inflammation throughout their body, and this systemic inflammation, unfortunately, is associated with muscle catabolism or breakdown. This is one of the root causes of a condition called sarcopenia, or muscle loss with age. So what happens if you give an older person the same pain-relieving drugs such as ibuprofen? You get a reverse effect. You actually get muscle growth and muscle gains in the older people if they're lifting weights. And again, this is because the drug will relieve the systemic inflammation that is causing muscle breakdown. So again, a lot of this depends on your age and your level of systemic inflammation. By the way, that's systemic inflammation. It's called inflammation, inflammaging. I'm going to have a huge article on that in an upcoming issue of my Applied Metabolics newsletter. I'm going to talk about ways to avoid it, ways to control it. Very, very important reading if you're over 40. This alone could kind of like recharge your body into making more muscle gains with a lot less pain. That's going to be in an upcoming issue of my Applied Metabolics newsletter. Now, all of this information has led to the existence of arachidonic acid supplements for bodybuilders. Now, a lot of people will say, initially, if they don't know the nuances of arachidonic acid metabolism, they might say, well, isn't that kind of like selling sand to the Arabs? Because, you get AAA produced from linoleic acid, which is already abundant in the diet. Why would you need to take an AA or arachidonic acid supplement? Well, the reason is that when you exercise, possibly due to this inflammatory effect that occurs in muscle after exercise, your muscles are depleted of arachidonic acid. And the theory is that by supplying an outside or supplemental source of arachidonic acid, you kind of could kickstart the anabolic process with much greater efficiency. And that's the basically underlying reason for suggesting arachidonic acid supplements. Now, okay, so what about these studies? Has this idea of arachidonic acid supplements increasing muscle hypertrophy, growth, and strength, has it been proven? Let me say on the outset that as far as I know, there's been 2 human studies published on arachidonic acid supplementation. They both involve 2 different dosages. They both involve 2 different types of training routines. And one of them monitored food intake, the other one did not. So that's important. I'll explain why in a second. But the important point here is that both of these studies were entirely sponsored and paid for by the company that has the use patent on arachidonic acid supplements. This doesn't invalidate the information, but I just want to point that out. There is, as I sit here now, there is no independent studies of the efficacy of arachidonic acid supplementation in bodybuilders or anyone else, as far as I know. But anyway, in relation to these 2 existing studies, the first study was an 8-week double-blind placebo-controlled study that featured 30 young men with at least 2 years of training experience. The subjects were provided with either 1.5 grams of an arachidonic acid supplement or a corn oil placebo. They were told to consume these 45 minutes prior to training. The results showed that lean body mass increased by 1.6 kilograms or 3% only in the arachidonic acid group. The placebo group gained nothing. No change. The arachidonic acid group also showed slightly greater muscle thickness gains from baseline compared to the placebo group. No changes occurred in either group in relation to fat loss. The arachidonic acid group also showed gains in bench press. They increased their bench press, I believe it was about 35% compared to the placebo group. And the placebo group they also showed gains, the AA group also showed gains in peak muscle power, while the placebo group showed nothing. A previous study, the other human study of arachidonic acid, that provided a smaller dose of 1,000 milligrams, and it showed a 13% increase in peak power, but no muscle or body comp gains at all. No muscle gains at all. While the earlier study monitored food intake, this newest study that did show gains did not. So it isn't clear how much protein the subjects were taking. Now, the point here is that, if the subjects who ingested arachidonic acid also increased their protein, a lot of their gains could be explained by the increased protein intake rather than the arachidonic acid, supplementation. So, this is kind of up in the air right now as far as how efficient an arachidonic acid. Theoretically, it could be useful, but right now, from a scientific point of view, it's really no solid evidence, in my opinion. Now, although arachidonic acid serves as the precursor for some of the most inflammatory substances produced in the human body, the studies show that up to 1,500 milligrams a day of arachidonic acid supplements show no adverse effect. Effect, I should say. Now, one interesting effect of these two human studies, one of the human studies showed that arachidonic acid supplement actually decreased an inflammatory mediator called interleukin 6, and it also increased one or two other inflammatory mediators. This would suggest that, if anything, the arachidonic acid supplement, rather than increase inflammation, actually had a slight anti-inflammatory effect. Now, to me, this is a little bit problematic because while interleukin 6 is a key inflammatory mediator, especially in older people, it rises with age in older people. And the systemic production of interleukin 6 is, again, very closely linked to systemic inflammation. However, after you train, interleukin 6 dons another costume, if you want to call it. After you train, interleukin 6 in muscle is anabolic. It does some of the same things that prostaglandin F2A does. It stimulates satellite cell activity, which is muscle stem cells needed for repair and muscle growth. It does a number of things in muscle which can only be considered anabolic. The fact that this AA supplement actually decreased interleukin 6, I think that requires further investigation. That could actually be a negative thing. But again, I'm just speculating on this based on what interleukin 6 does in muscle following exercise. So I have no evidence to show that arachidonic acid is detrimental in this respect in any way. However, I should also point out that because arachidonic acid, you can't get away from the fact that it's the direct precursor for some of the most potent inflammatory mediators produced in the human body. As such, if you have any type of inflammatory condition, arthritis, or let's say chronic pain anywhere in your body, you're kind of taking a chance if you take an arachidonic acid supplement, because the arachidonic acid supplement, as I said earlier, is much more potent than any amount of arachidonic acid you could consume in any amount of food. As such, a lot of that arachidonic acid will be converted into these inflammatory mediators, and they will heighten and intensify the pain that you already have. Now, if you take an arachidonic acid supplement, you might also notice increased muscle soreness after the workout, especially the most intense form of muscle soreness called delayed onset muscle soreness. That will be increased. Some people also get headaches when they take arachidonic acid because it has a minor blood vessel dilation effect. But other than that, it's fairly safe to take. And so if you do decide to try it, I should also point out that I have read some of the feedback online of people that have used these arachidonic acid supplements. They've been mixed. Some people say it helped them make muscle gains. Other people said it did absolutely nothing. So I think that what determines the benefits you'll derive from an arachidonic acid supplement is your existing levels of arachidonic acid in your body. For example, if you are very efficient at converting linoleic acid into arachidonic acid, I don't think an arachidonic acid supplement is going to do that much for you. A lot of it also depends on how hard you train, how much of the arachidonic acid you deplete muscle. So it's a very variable situation. Like I say, if you want to try arachidonic acid supplements, the suggested dose is 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day. They come in capsules of 250 milligrams usually. So we're talking about 2 to 4 capsules a day. Although the one study that did show some progress with the supplement used 1,500 milligrams a day. So that's something to keep in mind. and the manufacturer or the seller of arachidonic acid supplements suggests that you cycle it for 7 to 8 weeks and then get off it. Okay, that's about it for arachidonic acid. If you want much more information on various food supplements, and I'm talking about the truth, I am not associated with any food supplement company. I am not trying to sell you anything in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. But if you want information, the total truth on food supplements, nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging, fat loss techniques, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, general preventive health, women's health, you must subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. 40 to 50 pages every month, no ads, no bullshit, just pure scientific, evidence-based truth written in simple English. You don't have to be a scientist to understand my stuff. More thorough information than anything you'll find on the internet, in any blog, or on any website. Again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. I will answer brief questions submitted to me on the Applied Metabolics site from subscribers only. Any of you viewing this video, if you are not subscribers, please do not submit questions to me. I don't have time to answer them. I only answer them for the actual subscribers of Applied Metabolics. Also, if you want to have the if you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to the local shelter, adopt a dog. They're terrific. They're loyal. They relieve depression, and they're great. I mean, save a dog's life today. Take care.